Hi, I'm Abby.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Emma. You're listening to a clip from the Read It Forward podcast, and if you'd like to hear more, you can find us at readitforward.com/podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Enjoy! Now we have in studio a very special guest. We have with us Sally Franson, who is here to talk a little bit about her debut novel. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Can you tell us about your book that just came out this spring and a little bit about what it's about?
Yes, my book is called A Lady's Guide to Selling Out, and it is about a woman named Casey Cornelia Pendergast, who was a book-loving English major in college, and then immediately after college got a job at an advertising agency. She's now at 28, worked her way up to being a creative director. She's killing it in her world, but she's starting to have some of those very quarter-life crisis nagging doubts of, as the talking heads would say, how did I get here? And her boss asks her to start on this new secret project at the firm, which matches up literary authors with sort of morally bankrupt corporations looking for internet content. And so she's faced with the moral dilemma. Do I go through with this career that I'm excelling at, even though it feels gross, or do I sort of reevaluate my priorities and choose a different path? So it's a crisis of conscience, a crisis of fashion, and a crisis of boyfriend. She gets into a lot of trouble in her love life, too.
I related to this book on a lot of different levels. First of all, I'm a digital marketer and I work in books, so I kind of have a foot in each of those worlds.
Sure.
And I went to school in the Midwest, so I loved reading about the Twin Cities and felt very nostalgic in that way. And for me, I also read this book as kind of a love story in terms of Casey and Susan's friendship. I think that's something that we are always looking for at Read It Forward, is more books about really interesting and dynamic friendships. And I feel like sometimes when someone says that a book features a complicated friendship, what they really mean is secretly the two female protagonists hate each other.
So true.
But I think that the protagonists in your book really love each other and are always trying to find their common ground, even if that common ground is further and further away from each other. And I just loved seeing them kind of negotiate that relationship where a lot of times they fundamentally disagreed, but there was still that underlying bond. What motivated you to make their friendship such a strong part of this novel?
You know, I think writing fiction is a moral exercise. And so the question that I found myself asking in the years of writing it was, what can I stand for? You know, what are my values, right? Because they're going to come out whether I want them to or not in the book. And my female relationships in my life are the bedrock of my life. And so the relationship between Casey and Susan is very much based on the relationships I have with my friends, and then I think my friends have with each other, where there's an almost kind of primal bonding, you know, sort of we are indestructible, but we're going to test that indestructibility because we're also very willful, strong, opinionated human beings. And it was much more important for me to have that in the center as Casey's central relationship than it was with her relationship with Ben, who's this man that she meets while in the book, because that's honestly how it is in my life. I have a wonderful partner. His name is also Ben. I love him very much. And he came later. You know, my girlfriends have been there sort of through everything. And so I was reading the Elena Ferrante novels at the time.
I caught their name check in here.
They there's a little gift to the careful reader if they know about the Ferrante books. And while I think that Leela and Lena's relationship is a little bit more adversarial, that intensity, which is such a female-to-female thing, I was like, yes, I want to represent that, because dramatists need conflict. But I think we mistake, maybe because we're in an action-saturated, story-saturated age, that the action needs to be destructive. And I think what in Casey and Susan's friendship, there's a lot of conflict, but the point is not to destroy anything. The point is to push each other towards who the other character thinks that they will or should or might become.
Absolutely. And I feel like that was one of the things that I loved best about this story was a lot of times, especially in this like fun, upbeat, satirical mode, a lot of times heroines have to be kind of self-destructive to keep the plot moving along. You know, they have to make a lot of decisions that sometimes don't make sense in the real world, but I feel like you very carefully walked the line between, okay, you know, it's a book with a plot. Things have to happen, but these are still sensible people making mostly okay decisions, and then every once in a while losing their head. But don't we all lose our head sometimes?
Yes, I think that's really true. I mean, I think that's also, you know, one of the arguments that I think, or I hope the book makes, is that when you are in that mode of making boneheaded decisions, one of the things that returns you to yourself is your intimates, right? Your close circle of family and friends. And Casey's friends, especially Susan, they are her family. And so, you know, it's another great thing to dramatize, that even when someone is either going through a difficulty in life through no fault of their own, or have brought on difficulty in their lives, or a mixture of the two, there are people who, as the book would say, they name us and they call us home. They say, you belong here, you know, go do you, girl. But also like, I'm waiting for you, and I'll abide by you. And I think that's such a moving, like, beautiful part of my life. And I'm sure it is for many women who are listening.
Absolutely. One other thing I wanted to ask you is, I know that Casey and Susan, when they meet, really bond over their shared love of books and the kinds of things that they grew up reading. I was wondering if there are any books that you kind of feel like formed you as a person or even as a writer.
You know, I name check a lot of them in the book itself, but the big ones for me are A Wrinkle in Time, Bridge to Terabithia, The Babysitter's Club, Sweet Valley Twins and High, Judy Blume, Lois Lowry. I mean, sort of all the classics. My mom would only let me check out as many books because I was also always losing them. I was a very naughty library user. And so she was like, you can only take out as many as you can fit in your backpack. So I would stuff my backpack to overflowing. I wouldn't even be able to close it.
Have to get creative.
And I would bike home, but I would sort of bike home like with my body tipped parallel to the ground so that the books wouldn't fall out.
I love that image.
Yeah. So it was, you know, it was like both particular books and also volume. I was a sensitive kid and had a lot of empathy for others, and which just was a lot to take in when I was just like at school or whatever. And so a book was a place where I felt really safe and sort of within my imagination, I knew the terms of engagement. Like these characters might get into trouble, but like they were also going to be okay. And also I don't need to be in charge of managing them.
I love that. No, I definitely relate to that feeling of being like, okay, I can let go.
Yes, exactly.
This is beyond my control.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, just as like a willful little kid, you know, who is like, is everyone okay? Does everyone have what they need? And then I'll get really tired and just like read for 2 days.
Perfect. I mean, honestly, I still do that a little bit.
mean,
So
I was like, when I say used to, I mean concurrently.
Well, on that note, since we have you, and I know you're such a big reader, one of the segments that we often do with guests is You've Got to Read This, where we make someone come in. We make them. We ask someone to come in and share with us.
I'm being held hostage in the Random House headquarters.
Please send help.
Please send help.
We ask someone to share with us a book that they love that they wish more people would read, something maybe that you're always proselytizing for, or something that's just near and dear to your heart. Do you have anything that would fit that bill?
Oh, I do. I have 2 of them, which is, of course, a cheat, but this is what book lovers do,
yeah,
right? They're like,
absolutely.
name one book, and they just name like the last 7 they read. I am an evangelist for Nancy Mitford. Her novel, The Pursuit of Love, was a big inspiration for Ladies' Guide because she's writing about World War II, but she's writing about it in a way that's so teasing, even though it's talking about very difficult things. It's about this very wacky family, the Radletts, who live out in the country, and sort of the rise of fascism in Europe. And her characters are complaining about the communist parties. They're complaining about the anarchist parties. They're complaining about how boring the fascists are. And so she's sort of sending out these little arrows and just like zinging anyone who crosses her path, but it has such a blitheness to it, and that blitheness is intentional, right? Like I love comedy that's quick on its feet, and it's not trying to make a grand moral statement about the world that we live in or something like that. It's just reflecting our world back to us with a wink, as opposed to on a soapbox or something like that, which I think it is, what other genres or mediums are for. I love that book so much. I wish more people read it. She's just terrific fun. And then you realize, oh my God, she's so smart. And I like that mix a lot. I think I aspire to that. And then the other one that I've been reading recently that I love is Eve Babbitt's. She has 2 books out now with the New York Review of Books, classics. One is Eve's Hollywood, and the other one is, oh God, I can't remember. It's like something like Fast Days, Slow Times in LA or something like that. Maybe we can look it up. And she writes like a jazz musician. Her sentences feel like scatting. They're so cool. She's also writing about all the parties are obviously a theme in books I love. She's talking about all these parties she's been to, these guys she's dated.
I think books and parties are the best way to experience parties.
Yeah, same. Parties often stress me out when I'm like reading Eve Babbitt's or Nancy Mitford.
It seems so glamorous and fun.
I'm like, I love parties. And I like look up and I'm just like in the bath with candles lit.
A party of its own.
Yeah, a party of its own. That's right.
Slow Days, Fast Company from 1977.
That's it. Slow Days, Fast Company by Eve Babbitt. I cannot. She has such a gift for language that doesn't seem worked. And that's another thing I'm a big fan of right now. Prose that feels easy, as opposed to this kind of dutiful, careful. I think there's something really to be said for that. But I think that if you skew towards that, which I do, when you're reading these things that feel tossed off and sort of airy and sexy without intentionally so, it makes me not only want to read them, it makes me want to go out and live more, right? And not just sit in the bath and read books.
Hey, look, there's a lot to be said for the introvert's pursuits.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I've never read either of these authors.
Okay.
You and I were joking earlier before we started that every time I do you've got to read this, then all of a sudden I've got to read this.
You've got to read these.
It's happening. Yeah, I feel like Eve Babbitt's is right up my alley.
You will love her. I cannot say enough good things.
How did you come to read her work?
Incidentally, my friend Nick recommended her to me. He was like, I think she's a true extrovert who happened to be a great writer, and she's really fun. And I was like, I'm pretty much sold at that. And then I read her biography on Wikipedia, and, she dated Jim Morrison. She dated Harrison Ford. She was like the party girl, non-judgmental version of Joan Didion. And everyone loves Joan Didion, and part of why you love her is she's so hard on the people that she's around, especially in California in the 70s. Eve Babbitt sees the exact same thing and is like, okay, so where are the Quaaludes? And I just think it's such a generous stance to take towards the world, and I'm learning a lot from that.
Well, and what a fun juxtaposition between those two different mindsets.
Totally. And actually in her dedication in Eve's Hollywood, she says, to the Didion dunce for having to be whom I'm not. And I like that because she knew it. She's like, I can't do that, but I can do this other thing.
That's so fascinating. I love it. Yeah. Well, it struck me again. The curse of the TBR file.
The curse of the TBR.
It just keeps growing and growing and growing. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you. This is Sally Franson.
And I'm the author of A Lady's Guide to Selling Out, which is out right now.